start computing for the z, let's compute first for the value of the p hat. Okay, so again, p hat is x over n. So let's have x 78 over n na 240. If you're going to divide this in your calculator, this will be 0.325. And our Q hat naman, kasi kulang, our Q value naman, since wala pa rin siya, let's solve na rin ang Q. Again, that is 1 minus P. And our P is this, 35% or 0.35. Therefore, our Q will be 0.65. Okay, so everything now is given. We can now solve for the value of our Z. Good day to all of you. For this presentation, we will discuss all about the z-test for proportion under the one population of hypothesis testing topic. Okay, so let's start our discussion. Z-test for proportion. So basically, z-test for proportion is a test that can be considered as a binomial experiment. When we say binomial experiment, we are expecting two possible outcomes. Somehow like true or false, yes or no, 0 or 1, no? And the probability of success does not change from trial to trial. The outcome of each trial is independent from each other. And we have this formula for z-test for proportion. Let's have my pen muna. No? Ito, block tayo. So, for the formula for z-test for proportion, let's have z equals p hat. Oops. Let's have p hat. This is letter P. Okay. Minus p for proportion over square root of p and q divided by n. Where, ano-ano yung mga ibig sabihin ng mga variables na yan? When we say p hat, guys, this is a sample proportion. So let's write here, sample proportion. And this is denoted by x over n, or the point of interest over the sample size. For example, my sample size is 50. And out of those 50 students, 40 of them are boys. So, 40 over 50. Now, the result of that fraction in decimal form is, of course, that will be the sample proportion. Now, we have this, of course, yung z, that is the z-test for proportion. We have this p, now without p hat. This is the population proportion naman. Ayan. Don't forget this. Population proportion. Okay. Next, we have the n. I know you already know this n. Number of observation in the sample. And itong q na lang ang ilalagay ko. So, q, basically q is 1 minus p. Whatever the value of your p, i-minus mo lang siya from 1 or 100%, that will be the value of your q. No, kumbaga, I have the 40 over 50 as P, sa example ko kanina, for the boys, and for the girls, the value of Q, that is for the girls, that will be 10 over 50. Okay? So, just a sample lang naman for proportion. Now, let's have the assumptions in z-test for proportion. So, the assumptions are, the subjects are randomly selected. Second one, the population distribution is normal. Kung papasinin niyo, no, halos lahat ng simulan natin siya ng one population. The assumptions in having this hypothesis testing is that the distribution is all normal. Pero in reality, you need to check those distribution first before going in this type of inferential statistical techniques or statistical analysis. Okay? So, next, last assumption in z-test for proportion, observations are dichotomous or dichotomous, meaning dalawa. No, kaya nga sabi kanina, almost the same siya with binomial experiment. Okay? So, let's have our example. For our example 1, a recent survey done by the Philippine Housing Authority or the PHA found that 35% of the population owns their home. So, hindi sila nag-rent but rather sarili nila yung bahay. Now, in a random sample of 240 heads of households, 78 doon nag-respond na sarili nila yung bahay nila. No, they own their homes. At alpha level 0.01 level of significance, does that indicates a difference from the national proportion? Nakuha nyo? May pagkakaiba ba daw yung nakuha nila na 78 na nag-yes, we own this home, no? Sa amin ito, hindi kami nag-rent or kung ano man, nakikitira. Sa amin ito, 78 out of 240. The question is there such thing as difference between the 78 over 240 versus sa national proportion na 35% based on the recent survey? So, yes or no. Parang ganun lang yung magiging sagot natin. Yes, there is a difference. No, there isn't a difference. Okay, so let's start our solution. Of course, tulad ng dati, we are starting our solution by writing the given. So, first given is we have this 35%. And this is actually based on the recent survey. So, done na siya. Basically, this will be our letter P. Okay, 35%. Again, P is population proportion. Let's go back here. Okay, so P is population proportion. Kasi na ano na siya, na-establish na gawa na. And more likely, this is the national proportion stated here. And next, we have second given. Let's go back to our problem. In a random sample of 240 heads, so 240 will be N. Okay, so let's have N here. 240 and X is 78. Okay, so X is 78. Sir, wala namang X doon sa kaninang mga variables natin sa umpisa. Meron, ito. Sabi ko nga, X is the point of interest. Ito rin kasi yan X over N din yan. Ito lang is population, ito is sample. So, X is the point of interest. Wherein, sa problem natin, yung point of interest is yung mga nag-respond ng yes. They own the home. That is the 78. Okay? And ano pang given? Wala na yata. Okay, wala na. 0.01 na alpha. Okay, so let's have now our hypothesis. So, for our hypothesis, first hypothesis, we have the HO, H sub 0 rather, which is P equals 0.35 or 35% ito, we just convert this to decimal. Bakit naging P equals 0.35? Dahil, ang tinatanong, ang sinasabi, does that indicates a difference from the national proportion? Let's read again the problem. A recent survey done by the PHA found that 35% of the population owns their homes. In a random sample of 240 heads of households, 78 responded that they owned their homes. At alpha level 0.01, no level of significance, does that indicates a difference from the national proportion? So, more likely, ang ating alternative naman, since our H sub 0 ordinal is equals, meaning to say our alternative will be P not equals to 0.35. Okay, so our claim will be this one, null hypothesis. So meaning we are trying to say na proportion is equals to 0.35. There's no difference. Okay lang sila, halos pareho. So let's check. Our level of significance is based on problem rather, 0.01. And the Z critical values. So Z critical, based on this hypothesis, we used equal and not equal. Therefore, this is a two-tailed test. This is W, sorry. Let's delete na lang para hindi kayo malito. So, ayan. So, this is two-tailed test. Again, bakit po naging two-tailed? Dahil wala naman siyang sinasabing direction. Either to the right or to the left. Walang ganon. No? Two-tailed test tayo. So meaning to say, our z critical will have two signs then, positive and negative or plus minus. The question is, ano yung value? Sabi natin dito, we have 0.01 na alpha level and two-tailed siya. So let's check on our table, the student's t distribution. 0.01, then two-tailed. So 0.01, then two-tailed. Let's go. Since we don't have here a degrees of freedom, dahil ang topic is proportion, so dinivide natin sa x and n, wala tayong degrees of freedom, we will going to use this 2.75 doon sa infinity. 2.75 tuloy, 2.576. Okay, so that will be our value ng z critical plus minus yan. 2.576. Now, we should now compute for the value of the z. And kung titignan natin, for the z test value, our formula there, as stated on the first part of this presentation, is z equals p hat minus p over square root of p and q divided by the letter n. Now, let's check the given. P, meron na tayo. No, that is 0.35. So, okay na to. P hat, wala pa po tayo. No, wala pa tayo. Di pa natin din-divide. Square root of P, meron na tayong P and we just need to minus it from 1. That will be our Q. For N, meron na rin tayo. 240. So, before we start computing for the Z, let's compute first for the value of the P hat. Okay, so again, P hat is X over N. So, let's have X 78 over N na 240. If you're going to divide this in your calculator, this will be 0.325. And our Q hat naman, kasi kulang, our Q value naman, since wala pa rin siya, let's solve na rin ang Q. Again, that is 1 minus P. And our P is this, 35% or 0.35. Therefore, our Q will be 0.65. Okay, so everything now is given. We can now solve for the value of our Z. So, Z equals P hat, which is 0.325 minus the value of P or the population proportion. So, where it is our letter P, that is 0.35. Ito. So, 0.35 divided by our denominator, square root of P and Q. So, multiply daw yung P and Q. 0.35 and 0.65, which is our Q. Then, divide sila sa ating letter N, which is 240. So, you can actually directly input this on your calculator. 0.325 minus 0.35 all over the square root of the product of 0.35 and 0.65 divided by 240. And it will give you a final answer of negative 0.812. So, this will be our Z computed for proportion. Now, let's take a look on our decision ruling. So, let's have our decision rule here. So, 0 ulit dito. Since this is a two-tailed test, sabi natin ang critical value is 2.576, positive and negative. So, let's have here 2.576 and another 2.576 dito on the negative side. And of course, this will be our rejection region. Okay, so we have rejection region here. Okay. So, this is the critical values. Now, ano ulit yung na-compute natin? Z-test value or Z-computed, that is just the same. Negative 0.812. So, nasaan siya? More likely, dito banda, no? So, negative 0.812. And, if you can still recall our ruling sa distribution, sa rejection and non-rejection region, our Z computed falls sa loob ng ating non-rejection region. Therefore, we should not reject the null hypothesis, or we fail to reject null hypothesis. So, since we fail to reject our null hypothesis, let's go back sa ating hypothesis here. We can conclude that there is not enough evidence to reject the claim that 35% of the Filipinos own their home. So, we fail to reject this, so meaning this is correct. Okay? And this is wrong. Again, our conclusion, since we fail to reject the null hypothesis, we can conclude that there is not enough evidence to reject the claim that 35% of Filipinos own their homes at alpha level 0.01. Meaning to say, tama pa rin yung na-compute nila, o statistically proven pa rin yun na proportionate siya sa national proportion na 35% at alpha level 0.01. Again, there is actually a chance kasi na mag-iba yung conclusion natin depende sa alpha level na gamit natin. That's why we are always stating the alpha level used in the problem sa ating conclusion. Okay? So, I hope you learned something from this discussion. That will be at the end of this presentation regarding the hypothesis testing, one population, the z-test for proportion. I hope you learned, guys, and see you on our next discussion. Keep safe always. Bye-bye.